This is Markeith Lloyd, standing in court facing charges of murder of an Orlando police officer who tried to arrest him while he was on the run. Before crossing paths with the deceased officer on that day, Markeith was already one of Florida's wanted men for another murder, the killing of his pregnant ex-girlfriend, Sade Dixon. Then he's spotted at a Walmart with security footage showing him walking in casually carrying a shopping cart, and moments later, Lieutenant Deborah Clayton pulls into the parking lot. She grabs a cart and walks inside the mall. Lieutenant Clayton would be then alerted of Lloyd's presence, and she goes back in to try to stop him, and this was when chaos interrupted. Markeith shoots Lieutenant Clayton 4 times, and she doesn't survive the attack. Lloyd escapes once again, triggering a 9-day manhunt. A statewide manhunt was underway, with authorities warning that Lloyd was still out there, armed and dangerous, and when authorities finally corner him, he resists being taken into custody, and in the chaos, he loses his left eye. In court, Lloyd took the stand himself. His defense was that he acted out of self-defense without thinking.
It's a gun battle going on, Mr. Ryan. So it's a gun battle. And my sight is focused on her gun hand. She's firing, I'm firing, and I'm running.
You were going to keep shooting until she stopped shooting.
When she stopped shooting, I stopped shooting.
But investigators who interrogated him had a different view on what happened.
She was down. You already shot her. She wasn't getting up off her back. But you had to do what you had to do and stand over her and finish her off. Okay? Don't try and say that was you were defending yourself. You willfully went in there and did what you did. You willfully went in there and killed her.
The interrogator confronts Markeith with his acts, suggesting he went from defensive actions to unjustified actions. The witness who sat beside Deborah in her last moments would later claim that it looked like Markeith was trying to unload his gun on her.
And the prosecutor emphasized on that to the jury in court.
PDs in uniform packed the courtroom to back the blue and stand in solidarity with the lieutenant's family.
And justice has been served today.
After learning his fate, Markeith Lloyd having one more outburst as he was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs and foot shackles, looking at the sheriff in chief, yelling about oppression, ball and chain, and the system.
After hearing both sides, the jury filed out and came back with a verdict finding him guilty on all counts. The judge upheld the decision of the jury, and Markeith Lloyd is sentenced to death and remains on death row where he awaits execution. Outside the courtroom, the deceased Lieutenant Clayton's sister is relieved that justice had finally been served.
I just keep hearing life, life, life. We need to get to death because my sister didn't have to go. She could still be here today. She was a good person. She didn't deserve what happened to her. And this is the outcome that it should have been.
The sheriff also had something similar to say.
Nothing to say to him. I'm glad he's being put to death, and I'm glad I don't have to see his nonsense and his courtroom outbursts anymore.
Markeith Lloyd shocked the courtroom with cold defiance, but Dorrab Redden turned the courtroom into a crime scene by attacking the judge. This is Dorrab Redden, a 30-year-old Nevada man who is in court, facing charges of attempted battery with a deadly weapon and a possible term of 1 to 4 years in prison.
I shouldn't be sent to prison for a second time.
Have you looked at your criminal history? Have you looked at your criminal history?
In court, Dorrab tried to ask for probation, telling the judge that he was a changed man and should not have to spend time in jail. But Judge Mary Kay Holthus didn't look convinced. She had seen his record, a lengthy list of prior offenses, and wasn't buying the sudden act of repentance. Still, Redden kept pushing, pleading for a second chance, but Judge Holthus would not budge.
I think it's time that he gets a taste of something else because I just can't with that history.
And suddenly,
Say it about this courtroom.
in a moment no one saw coming, Redden jumped over the table, immediately lunging at the sitting judge.
In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada, this courtroom.
Before the judge could even react, Redden was on top of her, slamming into her with full force. Court officers rushed in, fighting to pull him off, and it took multiple marshals to restrain him. When it was over, the damage was clear. Redden had punched Judge Holthus, pulled out clumps of her hair, and left one courtroom marshal so badly injured he needed 25 stitches and treatment for a dislocated shoulder. A few days later, Redden was back in court. This time, instead of a plea for probation, he was now facing 13 new charges, including attempted murder, battery on a protected person, and extortion by threat.
I want to make it clear that I am not changing or modifying the sentence I was in the process of imposing last week before I was interrupted by defendant's actions.
The system he tried to beat just punched back at him, and in December 2024, Redden was sentenced to 26 to 65 years in prison. Dorrab Redden attacked a judge in open court, but how does that chaos compare to a man who didn't just reject legal counsel, but represented himself, shouted over the courtroom, and then cross-examined the child he tried to kill?
It's going to show. My son did not see me murder his mom.
This is Ronnie ONeal, and he is in court, facing multiple charges for the murders of his girlfriend and their 9-year-old disabled daughter and the attempted murder of his son. But this wasn't just another criminal case. This was a man who committed one of the most horrifying crimes Riverview, Florida had ever seen. It all began on March 18, 2018, when 911 dispatchers received a chilling call, and when authorities arrived, what they found inside that home was a bloodbath.
She made that call with fear in her voice.
Ronnie ONeal had shot his girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron, with a shotgun. Then he turned on their 9-year-old daughter, a child with special needs, and killed her with a hatchet. But he wasn't finished. He then stabbed his 8-year-old son repeatedly and set the house on fire with the boy still inside. Miraculously, the boy survived, and years later, he would walk into the courtroom to testify against the man who tried to kill him, his own father. When brought before the courtroom, instead of taking a plea deal or accepting legal counsel, Ronnie ONeal had other ideas. He chose to represent himself in his own murder trial.
Evidence is going to show. My son did not see me murder his mom. The evidence is going to show. He did not see me shoot his mom.
And when trial day came, ONeal marched into court and began shouting during his opening statement, ignoring objections, claiming he was the true victim, and accusing law enforcement of plotting a conspiracy against him.
And the evidence is going to show that law enforcement tampered with evidence.
But then he took it further, even shocking the courtroom further by personally cross-examining his own son, the one person who had survived his attack.
Hurt you that night of this incident?
Yes.
I did. And how did I hurt you?
You stabbed me.
Throughout the trial, ONeal's behavior only grew more bizarre. He raised his voice, interrupted constantly, and at times looked more like a man auditioning for a courtroom drama than someone fighting for his life.
You will know the truth, whether in this trial or the next one. Better believe it. If you think I'm here to play around with y'all, God damn it, I'm not.
But no matter how loud he got, the facts screamed louder, and to make it worse, Ronnie never expressed remorse for his actions. In fact, he outright declared to the court,
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
When the trial ended, it took no time at all for the jury to make their decision. Ronnie was found guilty on all counts.
But I'm going to look you in the eye and tell you, this is the worst case ever in my life. And I have seen some horrors, but this is it. And I'm going to mete out the punishment that I think this case deserves.
And on July 23, 2021, the court sentenced Ronnie ONeal to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 90 additional years, a sentence that would ensure ONeal never sees the outside of a prison again.
As count 1, Mr. ONeal, I will adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to life in prison with a minimum mandatory of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Ronnie ONeal might have turned an entire courtroom into a spectacle, but this defendant turned his sentencing into a shouting match that got him dragged out of court.
You ain't gonna be there either. You ain't gonna be there either. I should have killed you. Everybody knows you're alive.
This is Jeremy Christian, 37 years old, standing before an Oregon court, facing 2 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder, assault, and other charges. According to reports, on May 26, 2017, Christian boarded a commuter train in Portland and, almost immediately, began shouting at 2 young black women, one of whom was wearing a hijab. Among the crowd were 3 men, Taliesin Namkai Meche, Ricky Best, and Micah Fletcher, who immediately stepped in and tried to intervene. But instead of backing off, he pulled out a knife and, with the train still moving, launched a violent attack on all 3 men before walking off the train like nothing had happened. Ricky Best, a 53-year-old Army veteran and father of 4, died at the scene. Taliesin Namkai Meche, just 23 years old, succumbed to his injuries at the hospital, and only 1 man survived, Micah Fletcher, badly wounded but alive. Prosecutors didn't hold back in court. They painted Christian as a man full of hate and rage, showing that just 1 day before the stabbing, he had already assaulted 2 black women and even thrown a bottle at one of them. They brought in a lot of witnesses, from bystanders on the train to the man who survived the brutal attack himself.
He was saying Muslims shouldn't go back to Saudi Arabia.
Basically just like telling us that because of our religion or because of our color that we don't deserve to be here and that we don't deserve to live. But I feel like
the evidence was damning, so the defense tried a different route, claiming Christian had acted in self-defense.
Here's your question. One of your questions. Whether the state has proven at the end of the evidence to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, Mr. Christian's real-time belief was not reasonable, taking into account the circumstances that were present and Mr. Christian's self-preservation instinct.
But the jury didn't buy it. The evidence was too overwhelming and the motive behind the attacks was all too clear. Christian was found guilty on all counts. But that wasn't the end of the drama, because when it came time for sentencing, one of his prior victims was in the courtroom. Demetria Hester, a woman Christian had attacked the day before the train stabbings, and she came into the courtroom that day with something to say.
To Mr. Jeremy Christian, your mom should have swallowed you. You are a waste of breath, and when you die and go to hell, I hope you rot.
And that's when Jeremy Christian exploded.
See you there.
No, hey.
Go back to Tennessee too.
What do I tell you?
Go back to Tennessee too.
You can.
We don't want you here. All your race bait. You ain't gonna be there either. You ain't gonna be there either. Fuck you. I should have killed you. Everybody knows you're alive.
The court officers immediately rushed in and dragged him out of the courtroom. The next time he faced the court, Jeremy Christian was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Jeremy Christian erupted during sentencing and had to be forcibly removed from court. But what happens when the courtroom moment is so wild, even the judge is left speechless? This is Bass Webb, a 30-year-old man facing attempted murder charges standing in a Kentucky courtroom. Security footage outside a Kentucky jail showed the moment Webb, a former inmate with a very long history of violence, got behind the wheel of a car and drove it straight at 2 jail employees. One officer saw the car coming and leapt to safety while the other didn't stand a chance. He was struck, crushed, and pinned to the wall by Webb's vehicle in a hit that investigators later said was absolutely intentional. Webb was quickly arrested and brought before the court. But before the trial could even begin, the presiding judge, Vanessa Dixon, made a surprise announcement. She was recusing herself from the case, citing that she knew the victims. But just as she was preparing to step down from the case, Webb did something that would make national headlines. In the blink of an eye, Webb spit on Judge Dixon's face. The courtroom froze, and Judge Dixon could only mutter one stunned word to the bailiffs. Bass Webb was dragged from the courtroom, but that would not be the last time in the courtroom, and definitely not the last time he showed his complete disregard for the justice system. While awaiting trial, Webb incited a very violent riot inside Fayette County Detention Center. That alone earned him 15 years in prison, and then for the attempted murder of the jail employees, he got 37 more years. But the story didn't stop there. While serving time, Bass Webb was charged again, this time with murder. The victim was Bria Rowitz, his ex-girlfriend, and that conviction added another 50 years to his time. And 5 years after that, yet another charge, this time for the murder of a second ex, Sabrina Vaughn. But when Webb returned to court, he looked like a man straight out of a horror film. His head was shaved bald, tattooed with a hit list, judges, prosecutors, officers, media, and 3 names already crossed out. The jury found him guilty of intentional murder, and Bass Webb was sentenced to life in prison. And that man, whose name is forever etched into Kentucky's courtroom history, not just for his crimes, but for how far he was willing to go to challenge the very system trying to stop him, would only be eligible for parole only after 25 years. Bass Webb spit in a judge's face, rioted in jail, and if Bass Webb was a one-man riot against the justice system, turned his trial into a full-blown circus. This is Darrell Brooks Jr., and he is in court, facing 6 counts of first-degree intentional homicide and 70 other charges, including reckless endangerment. On November 21st, 2021, Brooks drove his red Ford Escape through the Waukesha Christmas parade, killing 6 people and injuring more than 60 others.
Parade.
Most of the victims of his attack were elderly people and children.
We have about 10 to 15 people down in the street. We also got multiple critical cases.
Reports say he was going nearly 40 miles per hour as he drove straight into the crowd, mowing down people who came out to celebrate the event. The entire scene was a disaster, with bodies of dead and dying people all over the street and worried family and friends searching for their loved ones.
Chelsea! With my mama! With your kids!
Despite a police officer trying to stop the SUV, Brooks didn't slow down. It wasn't until another officer fired shots at the vehicle that the chaos came to a halt.
Oh!
Brooks abandoned the vehicle and fled the scene, but would be arrested shortly after. In court, the prosecution had one job. They had to prove to the jury that Brooks's actions that day were deliberate, intentional, and calculated.
Marching with the grannies, this is her first parade. You'll see a diagram of where she was positioned. You'll see video of her getting struck. The medical examiner will tell you that Tamara Durand, cause of death, multiple blunt force traumatic injuries.
But Brooks was not about to give up, not by one long shot. First, he pulled a move no one saw coming. He decided to represent himself. He gave a rather emotional opening statement.
Everyone in this room has been taught pretty much as far back as we can remember is that there's always 2 sides to every story.
But then came the second wave of chaos. Brooks refused to follow the directions of the court and continuously disrupted court proceedings.
What type of statement is that? Your life is not on the line. Mine is. And you think that I think this is funny?
I don't think it's funny whatsoever.
So I think, Your Honor, with all due respect.
He questioned the jurisdiction of the court, quoting some pseudo-legal arguments as his basis.
So we're not going to address subject matter jurisdiction that has yet to be proven for the record.
For the record, I have addressed it.
No, you haven't proven it for the record.
And your objections noted for the record.
Have you proven subject matter jurisdiction for the record? Have you proven it?
And then he stared down the judge.
2003, criminal trespass to dwelling from 2006.
Right, I need to take a break. This man right now is having a stare down with me. It's very disrespectful. He pounded his fist. Frankly, it makes me scared.
Despite all his antics, the jury saw through all of his actions, and on October 26, 2022, they found Darrell Brooks guilty on all 76 charges.
Find the defendant, Darrell E. Brooks, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 3 of the information.
3 weeks later, the judge delivered a sentence that left no room for doubt. 6 life sentences plus 763 years and 6 months, all to be served consecutively.
It is needed, although largely symbolic, given the number of years that I have imposed here today, because frankly, you deserve it.
Justice was finally served, but not before Darrell Brooks left a courtroom stunned, disgusted, and forever changed. Brooks defied the judge with words, but this defendant took it way further because it is not every day that the judge gets into a physical fight. This is Jacob Larson, sitting before a courtroom in Jackson County, Michigan. On the surface, this was just a protection order hearing, but what happened next would leave everyone in that courtroom stunned. Larson was accused of stalking a woman. He had shown up to her workplace, dropped off flowers, and even posted a video online claiming they were dating. None of that was true. And to make matters worse, this wasn't the first time Jacob Larson stood before this court. He had already been warned to stay away from the woman, but clearly that message didn't stick.
I know, but it's like this fatal attraction kind of stuff that I warned you about last time. I told you to just leave her alone. She was a classmate of yours. She apparently has no interest in seeing.
I want her to tell me to leave her alone.
Inside the courtroom, Judge John McBain was already running low on patience, and Larson was making things even much worse. First, he was disruptive. Then, he accused the judge himself of being unfair.
You know what? I told you to leave her alone. And apparently that didn't get through loud and clear. So today, you're going to jail for 3 days. And the next time you violate it, you're going to jail for...
You and her are all...
You know what?
But Judge McBain had heard enough. What started as a 3-day jail sentence quickly snowballed, and the more Larson argued, the longer the sentence grew.
Buddy, y'all get along, y'all are...
45 days county jail. Okay. 93 days in the county jail. You want to go for a year? Try it right now. One more word out of you, it'll be a year of county.
Over Facebook.
Stand up. You're going to jail for a year in the county. 365 days county jail. Can't do it.
But then, the drama exploded. The judge ordered Larson to be handcuffed and removed from the courtroom. Now that was when Jacob snapped. He immediately began to resist, kicking off a violent outburst right inside the courtroom.
Put your hands behind your back. Tase his ass right here.
And then, in a moment almost unheard of in legal history, Judge McBain did the unthinkable. He ripped off his robe, left the bench, and joined the struggle.
All right. We'll make it 93. You can think about it. All right. Over Facebook. Means over. Well, so I know her. That's not in the community.
Larson was finally subdued, cuffed, and he would spend the next 3 months in jail, but not before leaving behind a courtroom moment that was so outrageous it's still talked about to this day. Now, Larson's clash with the judge might be something no one would forget, but here is a defendant who provoked the victim's family and barely made it out. This is Victor Rivas, a 17-year-old, standing in a courtroom in San Antonio, Texas, charged with first-degree murder. Reports say that in May 2022, authorities were called to a scene in Bezar County that officers described as brutal and deliberate. Ethan had been shot multiple times, and his body left lying near his front door, bleeding out just steps away from home. According to investigators, this wasn't a random attack, and further investigations linked the shooting to drug-related grudges between local teens that escalated into a cold-blooded execution and straight to Victor Rivas, who was arrested and placed in custody. In court, Victor Rivas appeared for a pre-trial hearing, and right in the same courtroom were Ethan's family, sitting in the gallery, staring down the boy accused of taking their son's life. Then it all exploded. Rivas reportedly made some kind of hand gesture. Some say it looked like a gang sign, while others said it was more of a dismissive wave in the family's direction. Either way, it was all it took. Suddenly, the entire gallery exploded.
First at 5, family members of a murdered teenager accused of attacking the man on trial for it right in the middle of a Bexar County courtroom.
The court officers and deputies rushed to intervene. By the time they were able to save Rivas from the madness, he had sustained several injuries and had to be dragged out of the courtroom for his own safety. Fast forward to April 2025, and Victor Rivas was sentenced to 40 years in prison for the murder of Ethan Soto and 10 years for evading arrest in a vehicle. Victor Rivas left the courtroom bloodied and bruised after provoking the wrong grieving family, but not all courtroom moments explode with violence. Sometimes they are just emotional.
Hi, Mr. Booth. How are you?
How you doing, ma'am? Okay, ma'am.
This is Arthur Booth, a 49-year-old man standing before the court on charges of burglary, grand theft, resisting arrest, and more.
Hi, Mr. Booth. How are you?
How you doing, ma'am? Okay, ma'am.
This was a familiar rap sheet for Booth, who would spend most of his adult life cycling in and out of the system, the result of years lost to drug and gambling addictions. But this courtroom hearing in Miami-Dade Bond Court was not going to be like any other. Judge Mindy Glazer was presiding, and at first, it was business as usual.
Actually, 3 arrest affidavits. Reckless driving, damage to property, leaving the scene of a crash with serious injury.
With no serious injury.
I'm sorry, no serious injury.
Okay.
She begins reading the terms of his bond.
The bond on count 1 is $7,500.
But then she pauses and says something that instantly changes the atmosphere in the room.
Mr. Booth, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you go to Nautilus for middle school?
At first, Booth freezes. Then he breaks down as he recognizes the face before him.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry to see you here. I always wondered what happened to you, sir.
The judge then goes down memory lane, recalling their middle school days as Booth continues to sob.
This is the nicest kid in middle school.
Oh my goodness.
He was the best kid in middle school. I used to play football with him, and all the kids, and look what has happened. I'm so sorry.
Oh my goodness.
And before he's taken away, she leaves him with a message that cuts through the courtroom noise.
Good luck to you, sir. I hope you're able to come out of this okay and just lead a lawful life.
Booth is still crying as he leaves.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
But this was not a story of radical change, because 9 years later, Booth would be back in court, facing similar charges before a very disappointed Judge Mindy, who recused herself from the case because of their prior ties.
I can't hear your case. I'm going to get another judge to hear it, okay? So if you have a seat, somebody else will be here.